Hi, it's Pat the Sales Engineer. The next thing we're going to talk about is where does a sales engineer fit in? Sales engineer? Somebody else? Nobody? How do they fit in? Well, let's start with the middle. Now, over these videos and all of the blog that I have and the hundreds of posts, I'm sure that you've begun to notice that I never say SE. I could abbreviate sales engineer as SE. Why don't I do that? Any thoughts about that? One of the problems with the job title sales engineer is over the years many people, not just in HR, have confused ideas as to what a sales engineer is. And sometimes they will say an SE is a solutions engineer, which is definitely not a sales engineer. If I write SE, it might send the wrong signals to people who are already confused enough about what a sales engineer is. And that's why the sales engineering university, as it were, was created, was to clear people up on exactly what a sales engineer is, so it would become obvious why you need one. So I don't do it to take more time to write it, I do it for clarity. I do it for you. The first thing that we can say, well, let's take it very simply. We have sales and we have an engineer. So let's go ahead and talk about sales. We have sales and we have sales management. The sales engineer relates to sales management by supporting sales and supporting sales efforts in the field. This is the primary goal of a sales engineer with regard to how he interfaces, or she, with sales itself and sales management. So we might also be involved, much like a solutions engineer, in assisting with pricing, throwing the solution together. We do a lot of documentation. We take requirements, do surveys, assessments, try to figure out what the customer needs. And in my 5Ds methodology, it's the first 2 Ds that we're talking about. You can read about that on the blog, and I'm going to do a video about it as well. But for now, let's just talk about sales and sales management. We do demos. We're the guys and the girls at the show that are out there in the middle of the aisle, not sitting behind a table, trying to shield ourselves from everybody. We're out there grabbing people in the aisles, talking to them, asking them how they're doing, curious about why they're there. Give them our card, give them a candy, ask them if they have any use for anything that we do. We're the real personable types, the outgoing types, the extroverts, the sometimes too much for people. We're just so nice and open and genuinely enthusiastic about people that sometimes people who are very shy and very closed are taken aback by people who are just genuinely friendly. They just don't expect it. But it's how you stay upbeat. It's how you stay positive. Your heart's in it. You can't be happy and fake it. You can definitely fake being sad, but it's extremely hard to fake being genuinely enthusiastic and interested in people. One of the things that we do that concerns management, and the reason I put sales management here, is because we are the consistent factor in the sales team with several sales reps. You could say Rep 1, Rep 2, Rep 3, Rep 4. Each one of these reps has different characteristics, has different histories, different skill sets. We work with sales management to create opportunity for the reps to grow. We might give feedback to sales management. They'll say, well, hey, it was Bonnie's first call. How did it go? How much did you have to say versus how much did Bonnie say? Do you see any areas that we could help out with? Their managers aren't out there with them. What do their managers always and only concern themselves with if they don't care about their career development? A spreadsheet cell, right? But good salespeople are worth keeping. Remember, that's where all the money comes from. Let's talk about engineering. On the other side, right? Sales engineer. We have engineering. You can call it development. And in that is all QA and everything else that is a part of the technical end of things. You can say it's support, QA, etc. What do we do for them? Well, for one thing, we give them product feedback. They aren't out there, and as a software developer, I know this, everything works fine on your desk. It's when it goes out in the wild that it exhibits any characteristics that are out in the wild for real. Well, these development environments, unfortunately, are not production. There's not a tremendous amount of money riding on the fact that it's running or not, crashing or not, the bug is doing something, the feature isn't working, etc. But back in our burning house of a customer, it is. Everything is a huge fire drill. They could have a huge workflow that is just, we're right in the middle. And now trucks are waiting, promises made, marketing releases, product rollouts, training. Everything could be waiting because something isn't working on their environment. And that's why they see it as a burning house, and so should we. It's a fire. It needs to be put out. It's continually consuming success. We give sometimes input into bug reporting systems because we have screenshots, we're programmers, so we understand how to describe a problem. We understand what's going on in the software to describe it in such a way that it can be actionable. Our favorite new word. Feature requests come in from the customer. And they say, oh, I'd love it if you just had one of these. I'd buy 10 of them. The kind of thing marketing would be interested in knowing. We also give feedback on our demos. Did they work or not? How could we make a demo better? In some cases, engineering actually creates those demos. We'll show them this is what we want it to look like, etc. This is the kind of data that we need. We might create a generic scenario or a scenario for each key vertical that we're in. Maybe we're approaching an insurance company. We need to have something for insurance companies. We'll do all the graphics and everything. We'll do all the animation, the 3D, all that stuff. But we may need to have the actual core data, again, depending on how your products are set up, done by engineering. So we communicate that to them in a very easy way that is actionable so they can actually do something with it. I don't want to give engineering problems. I want to give them, here's all we need to do, X, Y, and Z. And I'll let their management determine whether that's good or not. The other thing that we do is we work with engineering to get more detailed information, because let's face it, I'm not a developer for the company, for such things as media, let's call it. White papers. Maybe it's web content. Maybe we have a campaign. A sales campaign. A sales campaign means that we are using our customer relations management system, which has a list of our customers and targets and prospects and everybody together. Maybe we're going to say something about that new feature that's coming out next week. Maybe we're going to be at a trade show and we need to describe exactly the new feature and thing that we have that you're going to want to go and see yourself live. Engineering gives us that with what's called the stoplight report, the roadmap. Your product development manager, which we'll talk about in a second, your PDM, is the one overseeing all of that. and make sure that everything is done on time and that we're spending the right money developing the right features and components for our products that are going to sell. Because let's face it, engineering should be doing things based on a project basis. Sales would come to, and again, we're a sales organization now. We're focused on the dollar, not the technology. So we would come to engineering, let's say, and say, how much for this feature? Because we know we can sell with this, or worse yet, our competitor already has that feature. We need to play catch up. What's it going to take to do that? Engineering comes back with an estimate. It'll take me this many hours and weeks of clock time, in other words, wall clock, how many physical weeks and months, not man hours or anything like that, and it's going to cost you this amount of money. They report this to sales. Sales then turns that around, again, through the product development manager that we'll talk about in a second, and we make a decision at the executive level. Is it cost effective to use these engineering resources to create either this new feature, this new version, or whatever, based on the project as scoped by engineering management? We need a new feature. It's going to cost you $1 million for that new feature, and it's going to take us 3 months. Well, is that enough time? The product development man, I may as well draw him in. We're sitting here talking about it. The product management is going to want to know, the product development manager is going to want to know, well, marketing, let's put marketing in here somewhere, let's put marketing over here. They're going to say, hey, marketing, and secondarily, advertising. Okay, I can't just leave advertising not spelled right. Advertising. They're going to say, marketing, we want to roll out this $1 million feature. It's going to be a whiz-bang thing. Not only is it going to catch us up in that checkbox, does this product have this or that spreadsheet, it's also going to exceed what our competition has. You want to do a rollout and a big announcement? Let's gear up for it. I can have it ready in 3 months. Well, we may leave another month on there. We may say 4 months just to be safe. Of course, we don't tell engineering that, right? We just want to, be sure it's okay and stable before we stake an entire rollout of a campaign on it. So that's what product management does. These are the ways that we interface with engineering. So I guess it's about time that we start talking about our customers and our prospects. Now, all the time here, you've been seeing me add lines around the sales engineer. Now, the reason I'm doing it this way is because logistically, in other words, people-to-people wise, this is exactly how it happens. The sales engineer is focused on the customer. Is it an internal or an external? Well, could be either one. I don't care. I give you the same high-quality service and attention to your objectives as a marketing executive or as a sales rep or as an executive as I do my customers. It's so much easier for me to get everybody in the habit of treating everybody as respectfully as you would treat a customer than it is to try and figure out, well, customer's number one, sales is number two sometimes, marketing is, and start to treat people differently and treat their needs, wants, and desires, their goals, ambitions, milestones differently. It's so much easier to just treat everybody like gold. And that's what we do. We promote that culture, that sales-centric, customer-focused culture. That's what we do. Now, with executives, I like to say we have decision makers as well. Decision makers are sometimes executive, sometimes they're not. Sometimes a decision maker is taking these two departments or the customer and engineering into it. It could be anybody who's a decision maker. But in reality, they're, to me, all the same. And we talked about that in the last part where we said you make decisions based on, that's right, actionable data. It's up to me to take all the data, produce the reports, and we'll talk about reports in a separate section, to give you the information you need to make the best, least risky decision. So, I've got the big parts here. There are others. You may even have some of these combined. But let's treat them as separate business entities, figuring that if you're big enough that you have a sales organization, dedicated salespeople, you definitely need a sales engineer. That's the bare minimum that your company should be at. If you're selling things for $5 via credit card on a website, you have no need for a sales engineer. You don't have disparate groups, meaning desperate you don't have disparate groups, which means they are different and each with their own individual goals and objectives and milestones that don't rely on the others. So you can think of them as, some people call them IBUs, independent business units, or SBUs, strategic business units. These could be different. We could have a company that does a specific thing out in Ireland. They would be an entity as well. Doesn't matter. So the prospects and customers, when we talk about them, what is the way they would want us to talk about them if they were in the room and I had to get them something, get some information, communicate their needs and wants into product or marketing? How would they want, as a fly on the wall, to hear me as their advocate talk to them? These other individual units. They would want a whatever it takes attitude, and that's what I give them. Whatever it takes, it's going to happen. So I'm that single point of contact when it comes to selling, but also once it's done with the sales, what do we do with our sales reps? They're on to the next hunt. Then it becomes delivery, fulfillment. Sometimes you've heard the term, unfortunately, throw it over the wall. What that means is you don't have a single point of contact through the entire life cycle of the product and the relationship with our company. It's been thrown from one person to the other, and the other person says, "Oh, hi, how you doing? What is it you're doing here? What, you mean the last guy didn't tell you? The last girl just ran away? On to the next thing?" How would that make you feel, having to constantly explain what you want to one person after another in a company? After a while, you kind of get the idea that this company could really care less about me. And if you've had to phone into anywhere that has call centers in the Philippines and India and anywhere else, you know exactly how that feels. The bigger the company, the easier it is to squash you down and marginalize you as a number. We want this to be that customer that walks into the bank and we all know their name. We want to be this person's waiter and waitress and know what their usual is. We want them to love us for our customer service. That's what a sales engineer ensures happens, even though everybody else is focused on their own individual needs, their own projects, their own budgets. The sales engineer always makes sure that the interactions that the customer has with our company are stellar, top-notch. You've got to be a rock star, and you've got to really care. The other thing that a sales engineer ensures is prompt, timely communication. Unfortunately, we get wrapped up in what we're doing. We get wrapped up in our own issues and priorities, to the point where we forget that we're a customer service organization. Hey, I got my own fires. See what you can do. The sales engineer has to be an advocate for the customer. In other words, I speak for the customer. I represent the customer here locally, remotely, wherever. If they have an issue or concern, I pick up on it. Engineering says, well, we don't really have enough time, whatever. I'm the one keeping the sales rep that's in charge of the account up to date with everything. The rep might decide to call in or ask engineering and support what's the problem. But I'm always there. They have my phone number to make sure that we're entering in everything as a problem, as a bug, as an issue properly, so that engineering can can correctly prioritize, but I'm also knowledgeable enough in the product to say, how can I get you past this? What can we patch? What can I do to keep you going? Because they really don't care why it fell over. They don't care. What they care about is that the business has stopped. It's impaired. It's noticeable. And when they call up and they got a 3-hour wait, 5-hour wait, call you the next day, they are fuming. Fuming at that point because their business has been stopped. Now, engineering can prioritize all it likes. There's nothing I can do as a sales engineer to make them do one thing or the other. I can certainly communicate the sense of urgency to them, and if they've adopted a customer service methodology and outlook as far as the culture is concerned, even within just engineering, they'll prioritize properly. They have their own management, and they'll know there are times, there are dates, it's okay. Nobody has to hit these people over the head. If they're pulling for the customer like everybody else is, these things are fine. They'll take care of themselves. But engineering might go away to go do that and say, look, I really don't want to take a whole lot of time stroking the customer to let them know that we're on it. But I do. I'm not the one who's actually fixing the bug or shipping out something for an RMA. I'm the one making sure that they don't get so mad that they don't love us as much. I'm making sure that they feel as though they're our only customer. And that's exactly what an advocate should do. An advocate should be as if one of their employees was walking around going, hey, how's things going? How we doing on that? They go to sales and they go, hey, I bought this thing for $50 million. You kidding me? Why am I on hold? I should be able to talk to a real person, not going to some website. Okay, if they're that irate, for whatever reason, and let's face it, people around the world get irate at different things, I might be stepping in without even bothering them and entering everything in, taking the phone call, working with support that took the call, and making sure that at least it gets entered into our system, which makes us accountable. Another big word we're going to revisit, accountability. I'm not going to take somebody who owns a company here who gives us $1 million a year and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk to you until you go over to this website and fill out a form. They would immediately rip out whatever they bought from us, throw it into the mail so we would get it, and they would never, ever see a dollar from them again. They would buy anything from anybody else but us. And believe me, they would spread that word and that bad story everywhere. Well, where do you see customer service in anybody's job descriptions here? You don't. The whole concept of separating customers and having these different divisions historically was that once we got the money, they'd leave us alone and we could go sell another one. We're really only concerned with money coming in. We're not really that concerned with money going out. And before World War II, it was believed that if we got enough customers in, we would lose some to attrition and bad customer service. Of course we would. But we would make up for it by getting new customers. Well, let's suppose you sell something that is so high priced that your market, your target footprint is very, very small. And when it's small, word gets around, right? You can see the damage that can be done by one irate customer. So we never, in a customer-focused organization, want to say, it'll be okay, we can always get new customers. That doesn't sound very, very customer-centric. That doesn't sound like we're trying to sell them, right? Sales isn't just when they bought the thing. Sales is keeping them paying, keeping them happy. They're helping us with referrals and marquee accounts, getting us more customers. Why? Nothing beats a happy referral. Nothing. Because they know this can't be bought. So this is what we do, advocacy. And I mentioned that in the first video, and it's going to come up all the time. Everybody needs to be an advocate for the customer, but a sales engineer is paid to do it. It's on his job description or her job description, nobody else's. Sales is not comped that way, are they? They're comped on how much money did you bring in. Product development, that's not how they're comped. They're comped on, did we get a release on time? Did the software do what it was supposed to? Are we fixing the right bugs at the right time? They're supervising engineering along with marketing and advertising efforts to get releases out. So the next thing, let's talk about the decision makers. Remember we talked about all the data is everywhere. but not all of it's actionable. Well, a sales engineer has these touch points throughout the company that takes all this data and turns it into actionable data. And so now, that actionable data can be used by decision makers throughout the company to make their decisions. How much are we paying for coffee? How much are we paying for floor polish? How much are we paying for the telephones every year? What is that adding up to? Well, one of the things that we learn early on with our MBAs is that you have dollars in minus dollars out equals what's left. See, wasted all your money on an MBA. That's all you need to know. So we have revenue, we have expenses, and we have whatever's left. Seriously, it's like 6 years of college right there. So we care about the outs. And there's another thing that we're going to get very much into, which is how to calculate how much your product should be costing someone who wants it. And how do you figure in your commissions and how everybody else is compensated into that pricing. That's going to come up in, I don't think it's the next section. I believe it's the product management section is where we do that, because product managers are the ones who determine pricing. Select where the parts come from, which partners create them. Let's say this creates some of the widget parts that we need, etc. So executive decision makers, we give them all the visibility that they need to make good decisions for everybody. But we're also, as sales engineers, their eyes and ears. So our executive decision makers, well, guess what? They're not out in the field on the sales calls. They're not dealing with customer complaints and problems. They don't work on the floor at a trade show like we do with marketing and advertising all day long and hear the feedback and get a sense of the feel. Oh, I'm with so-and-so. Oh, their eyes roll. Why? They're not there for that. So we have to give them, again, actionable data. You know, I talked to 4 people. They were from these different companies, and when I mentioned who I was and where I worked, they rolled their eyes back. Really? Why? What are we doing wrong? Here's what they said. It's very simple. Very powerful information that you might only be able to get if somebody is in a trade show, out there with the customers, dealing with the problems directly, like a sales engineer would. So we talked about how we're included in here. We talked about how we're included here. For our executive decision makers, with our eyes and ears, we represent and advocate for internal and external customers. Sales engineers, we set the example for everybody else by making each one of them feel like they're my only customer. The same way that each of these people feels when they go into their bank, the restaurant like we talked about. They want to feel that way. They want to feel great. They want to feel like, hey, I'm somebody. Well, you are actually, and the sales engineer is designed to work with each individual part, this is where we fit in, each individual part of the company for the sake of the deal, for the sake of the customer. Now, an organizational diagram might show the executives and the big decision makers in the center and all the other departments, partners, etc. around them. And that'd be true for the sake of running the company. That's absolutely true. This diagram is to illustrate where the sales engineer fits in with everybody else for the sake of advocating for the customer and ensuring we get revenue. We're in there for the deal, not just acquisition, but also retention. We want to make sure we get and keep that money coming in. So our decision makers we work with to help them have an understanding of how the decision choices, A or B, well, how will they affect my customer? I have the visibility as your sales engineer in various parts of the company to be able to make that exact information available to you. You say, well, I heard, Pat, that we have a problem with the pricing being so high. Everybody's complaining about it. Yes, your price isn't high enough until somebody complains, but they're complaining and they're not buying. They're walking away. Why is that? How many deals? Give me some hard information that I can use to make a decision as to how we should drop the price. And then because we're dropping the price, how do I make up for that with comp plans? The parts that we get to make our widgets from Ireland. So engineering can support them properly, and they have people that are trained in the technology that we're using to be able to support in QA, etc. So a sales engineer is the person who's looked at to bring all the data together from various parts so a decision maker can focus on the actionable data, just the stuff that counts. Think of it like contextual, which just means the stuff that matters, the stuff that's relevant. So I give you all the information that's relevant, whereas without me, you have to go to every single other business unit, and just like we talked about, you have to compare their apples to they have a different system, they have this. You go, you know what? You tell me what you want, you tell me what you want, and I'll just figure out who everybody wants. But the problem is that marketing and advertising is going to give you their decision, their choice, their opinion based on what? Based on sales? No, of course not. Based on customer or engineering? No, of course not. That's not how they're compensated. You ask me what you sell as a company, what you do in product management and in engineering, and I'll ask you a very simple question. How are you comped? If you have a 1-month sales cycle that you get rid of people in 30 days if they don't hit their number, that's a very tactical way of comping your salespeople. You don't sell a high-ticket item. You sell a very quick item that somebody can get and buy very, very quickly within 30 days. If you have a 12 to 18-month sales cycle, you sell big-ticket software. You need to not be punished if they don't buy it within 6 months or 8 months, because that deal takes a lot of time. Why? Because it's a lot of money. And people who spend a lot of money don't do it and decide to do so in 5 seconds. They just don't. We don't, they don't. So the next thing we can talk about is product management, which is actually the most misunderstood, next to sales engineers, role in a company, especially if you do software, especially if you have products that are hardware, things that you manufacture, things that you create, fabricate from nothing. The product development manager, the PDM, is a person who uses the sales engineer asking things like, what is our cost over the product life cycle? So what's the product life cycle? Well, the product life cycle is, remember we talked about farm. I'll introduce that to you right now. There's all these little parts. Oh, don't forget Ireland. Ireland makes the casters for our widgets. These come together and cost us a certain amount of money. They come together as our little box. And assembly takes money. We then take our little box and we completely make it ready, test it, load it, make sure it's 100%, and that costs money. This whole part that we've just done here, from here all the way to here, is F, fabrication. And we said it's F-A-R-M. Fabrication. It's my easy acronym to remember this. The next thing that we do is we pair up our happy little box with a happy little customer. That costs us money. It costs you money to get a customer. to get them to buy it. This is called acquisition. A. Retention, and I'll have to remove a little bit of this. The next thing they do is, the next thing that happens is, our little box is busted. Our little box, our little software, whatever. Customer's unhappy. Well, he's really unhappy. Now, when the customer's unhappy, we're trying to retain them. So what we do is, we send it, fix it, replace it, whatever we have to do. Another good way to think about this is with a wrench. We fix our little product until it's happy again. And we send it back. So this part, making customers and keeping them happy, is the M, because we want to make them into a marquee account. We want to get them to refer us to other customers, so their happiness creates more money. Retention, the R, F-A-R-M, and I will draw this out clearer in a future chapter. The retention is how well I keep this customer. If they stay sad for too long, they're gone. I have failed to keep that customer. F-A-R-M. Now, the other thing that product development management does PDM, they will say, because they're managing this price and they're watching what costs everything and how each of these steps affect our pricing, they're going to be making decisions in product development as to what needs to change to meet our target margins. So we may get in, remember our little in and out, we may get in, or let's take it even easier. Let's just say fabrication cost me $10,000. Acquisition, now remember there's a bit involved in here, right? Because it costs us money to not get customers, just like it costs us money to get customers. A pipeline of 4% in some cases is considered quite successful. So let's say it cost me $20,000 to get this customer. This is all of your expenses. We talked about coffee machines and Twinkies and lights and insurance and sweeping the floors and floor wax and everything else. Retaining our customer. Remember, that's when we had to fix things. We had to keep it going. Well, there's a positive component, and let's just say it's $10,000, which is what we call annual support and update service. That's what they pay us each year to license the technology, right? We never transfer ownership of software or hardware. But there's also the minus of what it costs me to develop and to keep people that keep them happy and support them. So let's say it's $10,000 to do that, and we just evened out for support. And that's retention here. Now, so far we have $30,000. This is what it cost us. Well, I guess I should put a negative here. This is what it cost us to create this particular product and get it into one customer's environment. It cost me $30,000. We need to know how we're going to divide this up. Well, some of the things that go into this are, this is, let's just call it product cost for now. Let's not use too many weird terms that we haven't introduced. So it costs me this much to make. What has to happen here? Well, we need to make enough money to run our whole system. And we figured out, for whatever reason, that it's going to take us $30,000 per unit. Now, again, I'll go into the very details of how you do pricing again here. That it costs us $30,000 for as frequently as we sell these. Because we may only sell one a year, may sell 100 a year. Meaning that it actually costs me $60,000 to make this unit. Because I spent $30,000 in utilities, candy, rent. You just name it. Per unit. Okay? Now anything over $60,000 is going to be profit, but remember I also have to pay my salespeople. It could be 10, 11, 15%. You could have it structured a little differently based on deals per quarter. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Again, it depends on how big your product is and how many you move and what type of sales teams you have. Is there a national sales team with local branches and people in each of the branches? It gets complicated when you deal with very large customers, or a product that sits in many different places for the same customer. So we might say out of the $60,000 that it costs us, we're going to charge 100, which gives us a delta of 40,000. Now, in this really, really simple way of looking at this, we might say, well, out of this 100, we need to make profit and such, but we've already covered our basically keeping our head above water. So we can take that 40,000 and we can say, okay, we're going to make 40,000 gross on every unit. Because it was 100,000, let's use very simple numbers. Let's say it's 15% commission, and that's going to be 15% of 100 is just 15,000. So my commission comes out of that gross and leaves us with 25,000. Now what's interesting is the best model that I've seen work is one whereby the rep is allowed to lower the price to entice the customer to purchase, but every dollar that he lowers it beyond the target price that he's given by product development management here comes out of this 15,000. You want to drop the price by $5,000? Well, guess what? You're only going to get 10. You're not going to get the 15%. You're going to get 10%. That's up to the sales rep. If the sales rep thinks they really have to have this customer because down the road they're going to make a lot, who knows? They might go for no commission. In which case, we made 40,000. So basically, the product development manager has to understand and get input through the sales engineer and directly from other places such as the accounting system, customer relation engineering. Again, remember they're project driven, so they know exactly how much their projects cost to do. They are the guys who know what dollars our stuff costs. And I help them figure that out by, again, giving them information that they need from all these different sources. Now, marketing and advertising that we talked about here, and I erased to make room here, one of the things that we do, a few things that we do, and now I can erase some of this because we've had time to think about it. For marketing and advertising, a sales engineer will help create the messaging to make sure it's accurate and compelling, because we're very good at writing. We understand how to make compelling literature. We understand sales. We also make every customer so happy that they turn into a marquee account. That is the ideal reference. And they may even give us referrals, being active into referrals. We also help prepare event or show material. Now, me personally, I've designed many different trade booths. I designed the animations that run on them, the demos. A lot of time we can't demonstrate the products. We have to have what's called vaporware, where we show exactly what you would see in certain circumstances, even though it isn't the product running live. Many times we have to run it live, and it ends up being a little more risky. And that's what we do. We do pre-release media for coming release, and effectively, that means we support the various sales and release campaigns for marketing and advertising. And that's what a sales engineer does there. And this is the end of the second part of exactly what a sales engineer does and how they fit in. So we talked about, as far as prospects are concerned, engineering development, what we do for marketing and advertising, how we help executive decision makers, how we help product management, how we help sales. But ultimately, we are one thing and one thing only. We are an advocate for everybody, internal and external customers. We got your back. That's what a sales engineer is. We make everybody else successful. And now you have a good idea as to how exactly that happens. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and talk more about sales and sales management in much more detail. And we're going to go around the horn here and hit every one of these and talk about exactly the value that a sales engineer brings to you. And that is the end of the second part.